People who work in high-class restaurants and hotels, what's the most ridiculous, stereotypical rich person thing you've ever experienced someone has done? Ordering the most expensive wine in the house, pouring 2 glasses, taking a sip, and sending it back knowing full well they are paying for it. To those folks, I say thank you. Nothing makes employees happier than free, expensive booze. So story 2. My former boss, insanely wealthy, used to stay in presidential suites and would have any and all red removed. He was a high roller at several casinos, and they made special chips just for him as a substitute to red chips. He hated the color red because when you're losing money, you're in the red. Story 3. I worked at a nice restaurant in downtown Portland, and one day a lady called to make a dinner reservation for a large group. But first, she starts asking all these questions about security. We had none. And how I thought the staff and patrons would handle a celebrity dining there. Is there enough space to be private? They like to be private. Would it be okay if they brought their own security to stop people from taking pictures and such, etc.? But of course, she couldn't name names. I rolled my eyes, told her whatever they need to do, and booked the date and time. Yes, I was super curious who it would be and stayed past my shift to see who walked through the doors when the big night came. The group arrived, and it was no one. Not one of us who worked there recognized a single member of their party. They sure acted like they were someone, but all we saw was a loud group of douchey-looking 20-somethings. They actually did bring a bodyguard who stood in the corner with sunglasses on the whole time. The only attention they got from other diners was the occasional side-eye because they were being such rude and obnoxious a-holes. Shock of shocks. They treated our staff horribly and tipped even worse. We'll never know who that person thought they were. Story 4. I don't even work at that nice of a restaurant, but last month I got chewed out over the phone because some lady left her baby's actual silver spoon on the table. And we didn't know where it was, so obviously one of us had stolen it. Story 5. I'm none of the above, but a soldier. We held an annual ball at a local Marina Hotel restaurant bar and had it reserved for the evening. Barkeep, host grabs our commander a few hours into the event and says, "There's a guy. He's a daily regular for the past 15 years, wants to grab his usual nightcap. Do you mind?" The commander agrees, and the gentleman comes in, sits at his spot, and proceeds to enjoy the show while occasionally covering costs for those of us grabbing drinks, in exchange for a little small talk about what we do. After about 3 hours, he grabs his coat and heads out. He then returns about an hour later and proceeds to shut down the joint with us, still covering drinks here and there. The next day when I came in as part of the cleanup crew, grabbing drunkenly abandoned uniform or materials, the host gave me the breakdown after I asked how long their charges normally take to process, as I hadn't seen my bar tab hit my account yet. Turns out the regular owned a chunk of the marina and covered a combined $12,000 bar tab as thanks to the servicemen and women. I had a tab of over $450 waiting on my card, completely covered that night. It was glorious. Story 6. This isn't as much a specific instance, but something that happens all the time with entitled or rich people. I work at a very expensive hotel in Hawaii, and people will just come up to the desk and yell words at you. Like no hello or please, just luau or ATM. It's like they aren't even thinking of us as people. Story 7. I worked for a resort in the Seychelles for 4 years. I have hundreds of stories which would fit this post, but one that stands out was a very wealthy Canadian family who stayed at one of the private residences for a couple of weeks. They brought their own staff, including 2 personal chefs, but also asked for a hotel chef to assist their team with prep and local ingredient knowledge. A chef I was friendly with was selected to spend the 2 weeks with them. One day, another member of their staff came down to one of the restaurants and purchased 2 bottles of wine for €11,000 each. Now we had far more expensive bottles on the list, but this was still a notable sale. And later that night, I asked my mate what they had cooked to accompany the wine. Turns out they had poured both bottles into the pot while making a coq au vin. Story 8. I'm a cocktail server at the huge pool of a 4-star hotel, a woman said in a monotone voice, and without any eye contact. I lost my sunscreen. Find it. Story 9. I operated a premium chain restaurant in Canada. One day, this Indian gentleman started coming in at first by himself. On the first day, he spent $200 on wine and tipped $1,000. The next day, he did the same again. When we saw him the third time, I had servers fighting over him. Anyway, one evening, he got drunk on wine, and Brad the busboy made the mistake complimenting his watch. Mr. S takes off his tag and gives it to Brad. The next morning, Mr. S comes back to get his car and asks if Brad is there. I say yes and go get him. Brad knows what's up and is removing the watch as he walks over to Mr. S. Mr. S says, "Brad, I'm really sorry I got drunk last night and gave you my watch." Brad is chuckling as he is removing the watch and says it's no problem, and he was just holding the watch until Mr. S returned. The next thing Mr. S said, "I could not believe, Brad, you don't understand, I'm sorry because it was very rude of me to give you a used gift." And at that moment, Mr. S pulled out a box with a brand new Tag Heuer inside and handed it to Brad. Story 10. Back when I did waitering, there was a woman and her friends at one of my tables. The woman asked for a can of Coke. Coca-Cola, just so we're clear. When I brought their drinks and gave the woman her Coke, she looked at me and, in that typical rich voice, said, "Excuse me, honey? I asked for Fanta, not Coke." So I apologized, wrote it onto my notepad, and went back to get her a can of Fanta. Brought it to her, and again, she turned to me and said, "I didn't ask for Fanta, I asked for cream soda." By this time, I was getting a bit annoyed, but went back and got her a cream soda anyway. And surely when I returned to her table, she did the same thing again. I asked for Sprite. Should I call the manager? So for the last time, I smiled, and I went back to the kitchen and packed one can of each. Coke, cream soda, Fanta, Sprite, Pepsi, and Sparberry soda into a small plastic box and took it all to her and said, "Here you go, miss, take your pick." She looked offended and almost made a scene. She started lecturing me about how I'm incapable of getting the simplest order right and that she wants to talk to the restaurant's manager. I told her that I can call him and that I'll show him all the soda types I wrote on my notepad that she asked for, and we can get his opinion on the matter. She turned and took her damn Sprite out of the plastic box and said, "Just leave it." Her friends were silent throughout the whole ordeal, and none of them gave me any issues further on. I didn't receive a tip, as expected, but I shrugged it off. Most customers were decent. Story 11. Worked at a grocery store in uppity Gold Coast, Chicago when I was a teen. We sold soup for lunch, and when bagging them, we put it in a paper bag, followed by a plastic bag to make sure it's secure. Lady buys a soup. I proceed to bag the soup, and she says no. I'll just put it in my bag. I say, "Ma'am, are you sure?" Mind you, she has a Louis Vuitton bag that looks brand spanking new. 15 minutes later, she comes in raging that she has minestrone all over her Louis Vuitton and demands to speak to a manager. Story 12? Oh, yay, I love this one. First and foremost, throw a 6-year-old's birthday party at a tapas restaurant wine company. Try to feed them tartare. Scoff when your child asks for balloons or French fries. Try to feed them jalapeno creme brulee for dessert. Try to quiz them on picking out scents in wine. Sigh when they don't care. Keep ordering more wine when they fall asleep on the booth. Complain to in-laws about how exhausting motherhood is. Have to Uber home with a 6-year-old. Everyone else, order a walnut salad and then yell at your server for it having walnuts because you're allergic. Yell at server because the top of the creme brulee is burnt. Inquire about the immigration status of the chef. Tip your server $40 immediately after telling her she doesn't look too bright. Tell her she'll get over it. Shove your server when he comes to warn you that your reservation on the table is officially past the previously agreed upon time. Scream that he isn't allowed to touch you back when he tries to disconnect your arm from his collar. These were all different people. Story 13. I've got a pretty good one. I work at a luxury property in California, and we had the co-founder of a large payment processing company stay with us a while back. He only liked to sleep on his own bed. So when he woke up that morning, he paid a team to load his bed into a truck and have it delivered to our property. We then removed the bed in his luxury suite and set up his bed that his team had brought us. He only stayed with us one night, and the process was done to send the bed back home the following day. It kind of blew my mind that he went through all that trouble just so he could always sleep on his own bed. To each their own, I guess. Story 14. Don't work at any high-class restaurants or hotels, but I currently live in an old yet nice and comfy apartment in Giza, around 20 minutes from the Pyramids complex. The landlady is a very nice old lady, probably in her 60s, and is filthy, filthy, filthy rich. Last year, my car had to be repaired after a minor crash for more than a week. And when the landlady found out from the abwabs, doormen, about my situation, she sent one of her English-speaking maids to give me car keys for a BMW 520i, Mercedes-Benz S600, and a brand new Land Cruiser. The madam insists you use her car until yours is repaired. I was shocked, of course, and asked her if she still could go around with her lending this much cars to me. No worry, madam has 12 cars in Alcahira. Okay, I guess. I ended up only using the Land Cruiser because it's the cheapest one, I think. Another story is when she knew I would graduate from college soon. She asked me to come visit her place. I did as she asked, and she just gave me a set of keys and some money. Here, I have nice villa in Ainsokna. Go visit it with friend and family. Food and drinks is on me. I have maids and cooks there. Car, you can use mine. The money is for fuel. Happy graduation. I told her that I just couldn't take it, but she just shooed me away and told me to return her keys only after I really visited the villa. Haven't gone to the place yet, but I will soon enough when I have time. Ridiculous, yeah, but in a really good way. Story 15. I worked at Computer Tech in a small tourist ski town and had a few run-ins with properly rich people. The worst was a local lawyer. Called for support because his email wasn't working. I showed up. No one at my office would take the call, but I was young and eager for work, and asked, "What's the problem?" He told me he didn't have time to explain the problem, that his time was too valuable and I should just figure it out because that's what he paid me for. Let me assure you, as someone that bills by the hour, I definitely made that one work. The others are actually way more positive, though also super wealthy. One, old lady calls up, "Computer has a virus. Show up at her condo." To be clear, Condo is 4 stories directly on the ski slope, with a private elevator and dedicated movie theater. Computer itself is just junk though, standard Del Crapola from 2004 or whatever. I start the virus scan and it'll take like an hour or more. Half an hour in, this little dog is yipping at me, friendly-like. And the old lady picks her up, then asks how much longer. I tell her I can't really say. Scan has another 30 minutes, but if a virus shows up, it could take a lot longer to clean it up. Old lady, Mrs. Calendar, she says, "Oh, no rush. We just wanted to know if we should tell our pilot to warm up the plane yet or not." Yeah, a $1,000 PC and my $95 an hour virus scan are literally holding up a private damn plane. And she's okay with that. For the record, the dog's name is Marie. And I took about 45 more minutes and removed a minor virus, then reset her browser settings to disable about 35 toolbars and fix the issue. 2. Guy calls because his internet is crapped out. Show up. Typical wireless internet. Directional terrestrial. For the area. Midwinter. Go climb up on the roof and hammer a bunch of icicles away from the dish antenna. Come back down. Reset everything. No prob. Kids all back online. He asks if I could help with Sat TV. I say I'd try. Basically same problem. A bit of ice. And dish needs fine-tuning on direction. Fix it. He's happy. Leaving, he tries to give me cash. I say we bill through the company, but if he has a business card or something, that's easiest. He says, yeah, but don't bill the company. I'll write my personal on the back. Get card. Thumb cover's part of it. Card says PepsiCo. Read president near my thumb. Expect to move thumb, C of Western marketing or something. Nope, says, and CEO. Super secret, business card had a coupon on the back. Good for 1 Frito-Lay or Pepsi soda product or 75C off anything else from PepsiCo. 3. Guy calls our local repair shop, only one for 100 miles, asking if we install routers. Sure, yeah. Do you sell computers? Yeah, those too. Well, I'd like to buy, he counts on fingers or something, like 5 PC, 1 for each room, and 3 or 4 laptops to throw around the place. This is like $30,000 sale in a shop that typically does $1,000 a week in sales tops. Check with boss. He says, get credit first. Guy insists he can pay cash, but I should bring it all to his new house next week. Credit goes through. Show up at Mountain Mansion. In a 6,000 square feet entire flatbed truck of empty wine crates, straw spilling out of their wooden slats. Go to unload, old chubby guy walks up in sandals and cargo shorts. Hey, are you the computer guy? Yeah, that's me. Look at Guy. Assume he's property manager, butler, cousin, something. I'm looking for Mr. X. Oh, that's me. Here, let me give you a hand with those boxes. He helps unload, shows me the place, thanks me profusely for showing up on such short notice, etc. Turns out he was retiring from a CFO gig at a major company in Chicago. In the process of installing things, I saw the full house. Wine cellar alone was huge, 18 feet. Ceilings with a rolling library-style ladder on a half-moon shelf of wine. Connected directly to that was a walk-in humidor. Outside of that, a massive media theater room. The whole house was connected to a smart home system that juggled a DVD jukebox, this was before streaming, to every TV in the house, complete with 12 inches touchscreen tablet remotes. That, when carried, would cause the show to follow you from room to room, opening and closing hidden screens, curtains, and activating dimming lights. Insane. And yet, the guy was super friendly. Story 16. I used to work at a ski resort that sits at the top of a steep canyon. The geography is pretty extreme and people don't want to drive through the snow, so everyone with enough money stays directly at the resort. Our rooms generally weren't over the top luxurious, but we had probably the second or third nicest hotel in the resort area and saw some rich clientele. One time someone in sales or reservations screwed up with a conference, which caused the significantly larger and more 5-star luxury style place up the hill to become oversold. So naturally, they bumped some of them down to our hotel. Normally, this isn't a big deal. We'd comp them enough stuff like free spa passes place and a meal, and they'd be happy. They're coming for some random conference that sold a huge block of rooms. They probably didn't even know what hotel they were at or what type of room they were in. As someone who works at a higher-end hotel, you get really sensitive to people's body languages, and you can tell when people are grumpy. Normally, they're just tired from a long trip or pissed at their spouse or something, and it has nothing to do with you. But you can see it 100 yards away. This guy walked through the door and was broadcasting his crafty attitude like there was a giant lighthouse light strapped on his head. Not only was he pissed off, but he kept making eye contact with me to let me know he was pissed off about the move and pissed off that he had to wait in line to check in. I knew when he walked up that he was going to go off. He gave me the typically crafty attitude interrogation. What's going on? Why did this happen? Are you incompetent? Yada yada. It was really unpleasant, but I'm a pro. I was doing pretty good at the hospitality verbal kung fu and not giving him anything to be pissed off at me about. He started asking about the amenities of the hotel, looking for an opening. Do you have a pool? Yes, sir, we do. Here's your key. Do you have a restaurant? Yes, sir. It's really fantastic. Here's a voucher for a meal on us. Would you like me to make you a reservation? Do you have a spa? Yes. We have steam rooms, sauna, and a masseuse on contract. We also would be happy to take you to the spa at any time. Here's the number for our valet driver. What time would you prefer your appointment? It's also worth nothing that we're like 100 yards away from the other building. We even had 24-hour valet to come pick them up and drive them around, literally on call if they didn't want to walk through the snow. We have a better restaurant than place at normal prices. A nice gym, nice pool, the whole 9 yards. This was a wipe your ass, if you ask, nice kind of hospitality environment that most people really enjoyed. He couldn't really find anything to complain about, but he was still interrogating me. Then he asked me about the ski lockers. Do you have ski lockers? Yes, sir. The ski locker is on the first floor, just across the walkway from the tram center, so you can unload without having to walk up any stairs. The locker number is just your room number. Here's your combination. Do you have boot warmers? No, sir. We do not. He'd finally found something to go off about. The dude threw his head back and let out a big, "Ooh, you don't have boot warmers? What kind of place doesn't even have boot warmers in the locker room? You expect me to put on my skis when they're frozen cold in the morning? What am I supposed to do? Put them in my room where they'll get all smelly." Dude proceeded to unleash on Mai for a good 3 or 4 minutes. All the pent-up rage. He'd been building for the last hour or so, except his target was how ridiculous it was that we didn't have electric boot warmers in his private ski locker at the luxury hotel. I worked in high-end hospitality for 10 years, and probably the second worst ass-chewing I ever received from a customer was over our lack of damn boot warmers. Story 17. Had a business dude rent one of our apartments for 3 weeks at this fancy hotel I worked at. Second day, we get a maintenance call. He wants us to remove to the TV. Not replace it, just remove it entirely. As housekeeper, I head up with maintenance to clean up any mess from the move and got to see it all. The guest is removing our TV because he's gone and bought his own. Bigger, flashier, brand new. There was also a brand new, I cleaned up the packaging, PS4 he was hooking up to his new TV. We had no idea if this was against policy, so we left it. Guy's paying for the room. He's not broken anything, I'd gaff. At the end of his stay, he leaves it all behind. Maintenance dude took the TV, easier to smuggle out the service entrance for him. I took the PS4 and sold it for more traveling funds. Thanks, ridiculously rich business dude. You paid for 2 weeks of traveling. Not sure if this counts, but I totally forgot about the seriously loaded addict who hired our penthouse, done it for 3 days and painted every inch of it black before doing a runner. Story 18. Worked in a fancy smancy lobster pound, restaurant on the water where it had a lot of outdoor seating. These very, very wealthy people come to eat and demand a table outside for dinner. Now it's just before sundown in the middle of summer in Maine, and we're on the water, so mosquitoes are definitely not scarce. These people sit down, order a $200 bottle of wine, a massive lobster each, and some appetizers. They seem to enjoy the meal up until the sun sets and the bugs come out. These people were not happy and complaining about it, and the crafty restaurant not paying for mosquito spraying. The waitress gets a couple candles to light and asks if they need anything else. And those mother duckers asked her to stand next to them with a fly swatter. She laughed, thinking they were joking, and the man said, "Whatever happened to good service nowadays? They also left 0 tip on a $350. Story 19. I play poker for a living, and every now and then some rich guy will sit down and start going all in every hand for $500 without looking at his cards. One day I was in a game where a guy was betting $3,000 without looking at his cards. It was insane to me, but for him, I guess it wasn't that much money. Story 20. This is more in the vein of a rich git stereotype, but my dad used to work as a valet for lorries in downtown Chicago. Some pretty well-known football player came in about 15 minutes before closing with a group of friends. He made them reopen the kitchen so they could all have steaks. Then they stayed for almost 2 hours after close being really loud and obnoxious and rude to most of the staff. He also tipped everyone horribly, especially considering everyone had to stay later because of him. In contrast to this guy, there was another NFL player that came in that was not as famous. He was extremely kind to everyone and tipped amazingly. He didn't drive there, so there was no car for my dad to get, but he asked my dad if he could hail him a cab, and when he did, he gave him $100 just for that. Story 21. Average snobby rich people, but also many celebrities, were encountered with a mix of good and bad experiences, including Jennifer Aniston and Michael Ian Black. I used to be the head host and event manager for a very popular and swanky restaurant in Austin, Texas. For the most part, they were quite civil and in no way demanding for special accommodations. The owners of the restaurant required us to notify management in order for them to get special treatment, however. They clearly did not want to make a fuss about being there and whatnot. Regarding generic rich people, it was never quite that bad. Although I did have one guy slip two $100 at different times in order to move up the waiting list faster, and another couple who came in to eat before heading next door to A-Cool to see Jack White. It was a weekend night at 6:30, our busiest time, and I informed him it would be a 2-hour wait. He immediately got agitated and started to go on about how he had tickets to the show and needed to be seated immediately. And at this point, I can tell he has already had way too much to drink. I pointed out to him that pretty much everyone in the restaurant was pretty much doing the same, and they made reservations. He got angrier with me because he had called earlier trying to make a reservation. We don't take reservations for the current day after 5 p.m., so he was led to believe I lied to him and asked for my manager and began to berate and insult me in front of all the other guests. Luckily, the no-nonsense manager was on duty and asked him to leave, and while doing so, took one of our chairs outside the entrance and threw it into oncoming traffic. We also got celebrities on a weekly basis in the summertime and during ACL and SECSW. 2 instances in particular stand out the most. One with Michael Ian Black and the other with Jennifer Aniston. Upon his entering, I didn't realize it was him at first, and we were required to ask for both first and last name from the head of the party in order to put them into the open table system. The reason why was to ensure we knew exactly when and for how long they were seated and who their server was in case they called back with complaints or the occasional praise. Anyway, in walks Mib, and after asking him for his name, his just snaps immediately at me exclaiming that I don't need his name. I apologize and explain, and at this point I just label them as Guest X. But he proceeds to think I was explaining in order to still receive his name. I then inform him there is a slight wait, and he then gets annoyed even more and points out there are several empty booths. I tell him those are for reservations within the next hour, and unfortunately, I can't seat him there. I direct him to the bar while he waits. I get to seating him and begin to tell him about the restaurant as I'm supposed to do, and he just snaps that he and his guest would like to not be bothered. For the rest of his visit, he was rude to several servers and food runners, and unnecessarily condescending concerning his order. I don't quite remember what tip he left, but it was subpar. Even more so based on the fact I sat him in one of the best servers in the restaurant. I just wanted to go up to him and tell him not to worry about us calling paparazzi and informing them he was there because 1, I get fired immediately, and 2, they literally would not give a flying duck, Jay. Now, to anyone who is worried here, Ms. Aniston was not the rude one. In fact, she was quite friendly. Earlier in the day, I get a call from this woman wanting to make a reservation for 8. No problem. It was the same day as the Women's World Cup, so we were really slow. And she wants a table by the window, which was also not a problem. However, then she proceeds to demand that no other parties be seated at any tables directly next to them for the duration of the meal. I explained to her I'll try my best to accommodate this, but in no way can I guarantee it if more guests show up than is possible to reach that goal. She goes off. She starts telling me I better do this because the table is seating several high-profile people and that they demand they have this demand met. I ask who the people are and she will not reveal information because I'll call the paparazzi. I'd also like to add, I don't have a damn clue how I would even go about doing that. Anyway, they show up and I realize it is Jennifer Aniston as well as Jason Bateman, Sia, and Sandra Bullock. She wasn't as exciting to see because I had seen her multiple times in Austin over the years and got to meet her while eating at a restaurant she owns. They were absolutely the nicest people, incredibly friendly. They even allowed for the employees to take a few pics after the meal. But the best part was when the assistant to Ms. Aniston, the woman on the phone, was finally seated. She had to eat at the bar by herself and was not included. Story 22. So I've played at a lot of these venues with rich clientele, but the one that takes the cake is the rich cock waffle that comes and demands we play insert pop song on the Note or 10 billboard, because his little princess likes it. Now, while we have taken requests before, what's difficult here is that my fellow colleagues and I, professional string musicians, are getting paid by the venue to play classical music that we have pre-agreed on and prepared. My colleagues and I do not know the melody, nor harmony, nor even the key of generic pop song, no. 7. Not even that, but we are not getting paid by you or your little princess, so we aren't going to play it. Not that this makes us exactly loved by some of the venue's patrons. Story 23. I worked at a restaurant in the lobby of a rather nice hotel. There was a rich dude that basically lived there. He would eat in our restaurant every night. Our chef had to handpick his steaks from a local butcher. The steaks were damn massive. It was always specially prepared just for him. Every damn time this idiot would take 2 or 3 bites and complain to everyone in earshot that his steak was terrible. Every damn time. This dude was odd. He would only drink our cheap wine that we served by the glass. However, he would request that you open a fresh bottle just for him. He couldn't possibly drink a glass of wine out of a bottle that was first opened for someone else. Even if I just opened the wine and poured a glass to the person next to him, that bottle was considered tainted to him. If you are that damn picky, just buy your own damn bottle of wine. Oh, and one last thing. He parked in the handicapped spot out front, even though he is not handicapped. But because he spent so much damn money at the hotel, the managers refused to make him move his car or have it towed. Story 24. I have a positive one to throw in amidst all the negative. I'm loosely acquainted with someone who is obscenely rich. He dated my best friend for a while back when we were in college. As you can imagine, he bought her fancy things all the time, took her on expensive family vacations with his folks, etc. He was a stereotypical rich kid, but he was also kind and still very down to earth. They dated about a year, and in the spring we went spring breaking in his family's condo at a famous spring break beach location. And there was just me, my best friend, him, and a couple of his friends. The group decided we wanted good old-fashioned Waffle House breakfast after a night of revelry. After eating, I noticed he was lingering behind the group. He'd said he had to take a leak, but he stopped back by the table on his way out to the car. Curious, I ran back to the restrooms just so I could pass by the table to see what he'd done. He left the waitress a small pile of Benjamins as a tip. Had to be $400 or $500. I couldn't quite tell because they were folded and rumpled from being in his wallet. My mouth fell open when I saw it, and I forgot I was even heading to the restroom. I looked out by the car and he was watching me through the glass windows, held up his finger to his lips, mouthing, "Shh," and beckoned me back out to the car. I didn't tell, but my eyes were glued to the table as we pulled away in his car. The waitress collapsed into the seat of the table when she saw it. Pretty sure she was crying. Letting that guy get away was the dumbest thing my best friend ever did in her life. Story 25. I interviewed at a large hotel attached to a casino, and while I was being shown around the front desk, a woman walked up, said nothing, and got room keys after being greeted by the front desk agent. She immediately turned and walked away. Then the manager who was interviewing turned to me and said, "That's Mrs. Rich Lady Pants. You never ask her for her name, her ID, or forbid a credit card. She stays here comped once or twice a week because her husband spends so much in the casino. If you upset her, she will yell at you and then hand the person working next to you a $100 just to spite you." I ended up turning down a job there, thankfully so, because apparently she wasn't the only guest of her type there. Story 26. They made me take their waters back, dump out the glass, put ice in the glass, add water, dump out the water, but keep the ice, then fill the glass up with water again. I just went to the kitchen and walked out with the same glasses. Story 27. My uncle works at a very upscale restaurant on a very well-to-do and desirable vacation island in the Atlantic Ocean. One of their regular customers is a billionaire oil guy. My uncle has told me he arrives on a yacht that tows a smaller yacht. The smaller yacht is still big enough to have a helicopter. He demands to have his dogs seated at the table and feeds them foie gras and expensive water. When he takes humans to eat, my uncle has never seen him with the same woman twice, and often it's a table of women. If he really liked the meal, he will go through the restaurant and, in front of everyone, peel off crisp 100s from a giant roll of money in his pocket and tip every service person, whether they helped or not. One time, the owner got a call from health inspectors saying they received a complaint that dogs were seen eating in the restaurant. All the owner did was speak the billionaire's name, and the health inspector said, "Oh, okay, bye." Story 28. Worked at a Hilton for a little while. Made about a dime above minimum wage cleaning bathrooms, walkways, polishing brass handrails, etc. I walked around with an obvious cleaning card and was not service staff. Once, about 2 a.m., this obscenely rich family barged in fighting with each other, generally being asses, and their airport shuttle driver was hauling in case after case of luggage, poor guy. The matriarch of the family snapped me over, pushing a custodial cart, and threw a $50 at me and barked to have the luggage brought to their room. Then they laughed at me for bending over to pick up $50 and laid the rich attitude on thick. I went, "Yes, ma'am, I sure will." Wheeled my cart away $50 in the black, and took a nap in the way back of the laundry room behind the machines. Oh man, it was so warm and noisy. You could sleep off a nuclear bomb. I missed that spot. The family wanted me when their luggage was still in the lobby the next morning. Fortunately, I was so anonymous and unworthy of their attention they couldn't describe me, and the camera worker in security was too hungover to give a crap. For all the crap I got away with, though, that job sucked. The worst was that the place hosted child pageants. I've never seen such a group of vicariously entitled behavior. Yuck. Story 29. This lady ordered the Ike and Tina tuna. I politely asked her if she wanted the plate or platter. Aghast, she replied, "I don't understand the question, and I won't respond to it." Story 30. Longtime lurker here. Worked abroad at a high-end beach club in Greece, where all our clients had to speak English as all the staff were Brits. Now this place is fairly top-end. Tabs at the end are often 20,000 pounds after a week kind of place. I worked all over, but mostly in the restaurant, and we had some great ones. Asked to turn down the volume of the insects in our outdoor restaurant. Had a competition with his mate to see if he could get the biggest bar bill of the week. Bought a bottle of rosé costing 60 pounds just to have a glass. Their villa was 5-minute walk from the club, so paid extra for a private driver for the week. Paid for an in-villa host for 3 meals a day for 2 weeks. Just for when they wanted to eat in, my friend was the host, and she made 5 meals in total. All I can think of at the minute was a brilliant place to work, though. And all in all, the guests and staff were brilliant to work for, with going back this summer. Story 31. I work at a Marriott, one that is more expensive than your typical hotel, but by no means a place that millionaires or celebrities would come to, especially because of our suburban location. However, that doesn't mean I don't often get people who think that because they are paying $150 a night on a Marriott hotel room, honestly not that much, but it feels a lot to them, that they can be just as rude and entitled. My favorite little story is the guy who was shooting hoops at our sports court too early in the morning, and when I asked him to stop, he just looked at me and threw the ball as far as he could into the parking lot, saying, "I'm paying too much to be treated this way. I'm talking to your manager." Story 32. Find fault about the tiniest details that they deserve and require. My Merlot was served at 20 degrees Celsius. It is supposed to be served at 17 degrees Celsius. And then don't tip. Rich people don't get rich because they are generous. Story 33. There was this classic trick I used to do when seating people. If, based on the logistics, I needed someone to sit at a table I knew was the least desirable one, close to the toilet, entrance, etc., I would always make it look like it's reserved for VIP clients or in case the boss decides to come in to eat. Pretentious rich people want the opportunity to be seated somewhere special so badly that they never ask questions and go for it right away. It made my job a billion times easier back then. Story 34. Ask to purchase 2 of our high-rise bar chairs and keep them in the back for when they come. And there's too many people at our bar and they have to wait. Our bar chairs cost $8,000 each. These people want to spend $16,000 just so they can sit whenever they come in. Our managers and owners have enough sense not to pander this much to such freaks. Story 35. The dude's fiancée lost her ridiculously big and expensive engagement ring in the pool. So he ordered the hotel to close the pool area to everyone and got all the staff to look for it. The thanked the hotel guests who helped with expensive bottles of wine. Story 36. So not a restaurant or a hotel, but a travel agent. Client is a banana. Client can't drive and crashes car. Client walks out of police station after filling out all paperwork following the crash and decides to commandeer the first helicopter he sees to get him where he wants to go. Because rich people logic. There was a pilot to go with the helicopter to eliminate any confusion on that count. Client definitely would not be able to manage a helicopter on his own. Damn, he couldn't even manage his own travel plans. Story 37. Not a restaurant hotel worker. However, we were living in the Bahamas for a few months, and to occupy her time, my mother volunteered at the school. This got the attention of a rich person. She invited us to Windermere Island. This is the kind of gated area where royalty have estates and you do not get to visit. The experience was surreal. We realized we weren't invited to chat. We were summoned to listen and entertain this bored housewife of a Texas oil tycoon. She had no interest in us. Just talking about how she thought these kids should be helped. She never came to the school. We spent a couple hours there as this lady rambled on with the most twisted thought process. Not crazy, just twisted by circumstance, like a bird in a gilded cage. Then we were dismissed. Story 38. I was in Amsterdam to judge the Substances Cup years ago, with about 30 people that had all expenses paid by this one rich dude that owned race cars we all worked on. We all were trying to go to lunch one day when we came across a steakhouse. It was packed. They said we wouldn't be able to all fit for hours. The rich guy, without even hesitating, asked, "Can we smoke in here?" They replied that there was absolutely no smoking in the restaurant, as is most of Amsterdam, outside of coffee shops. He asked for the manager. When they came over, he said, "How much will it be to empty the restaurant?" The manager looked confused. Rich dude repeats, "I want to know how much money you want to get everyone out of here, so my friends and I can have lunch and smoke." I think the manager made a phone call or something. Came back, spoke with the rich dude, and said to wait a minute. We had to wait about 15 minutes, but slowly. Everyone began leaving with to-go boxes and had surprised looks on their faces because they weren't paying their checks. We ended up pulling together a bunch of tables and ordering a ton of food while everyone smoked weed. I barely even got to eat because I was the only one that could roll worth a crap, so I probably rolled like 20 while waiters came around to check on us. It was really surreal. I think the restaurant told their customers that there was an issue and they had to close, but their meals would be comped. In reality, they were all added to my friend's bill. I don't even want to know how much he spent just for lunch that day. At the time, it was a place I couldn't even afford going to on my own. This guy pays everyone to leave, pays the manager to shut the doors, pays to let us smoke weed in a place that doesn't allow smoking weed. At first, the waiters and staff seemed really pissed. But he would tip them like $100 every time they would refill his water or whatever, so they were soon having a great time. It was the most ultimate flex move I'd ever seen. Story 39. Once saw a Wolf of Wall Street type character trying to impress his flock of sheep in an expensive bar. He approaches the server and abruptly orders a round of expensive whiskeys. He then pulls a wad of $100 bills out and extends his arm to her saying, "Take some peasant," the whole time refusing to look at her, instead looking at his friends for approval. She swiftly smashed the entire wad out of his hand, and I took great pleasure in his angry reaction while he scrambled to pick up the cash in a crowded bar. Story 40. Strange thing happened to me the other day. I was in a supermarket, Tesco in the UK, grabbing some food to cook for the next day with a friend. I'd left my wallet at home on purpose to avoid trying to eat unhealthy outside of my house. I'm in the queue, raw chicken in my hand, and I notice I've ducked up. I've left my wallet at home. Luckily, my friend was with me in the queue, and before I can say anything else, he says, "Don't worry, I got you." Some random, suave-looking dude in front of us, in his 40 or 50, turns to us and says, "No guys, don't worry, I got you." We think he's joking, so proceed to laugh and continue talking amongst ourselves. The suave dude instructed an assistant to grab him 2 packets of cigarettes and scan our stuff too, at the self-checkout. We were confused at this point. He was being serious about buying our stuff? We wholeheartedly tried to reject his offer. In the end, he kept insisting, so we allowed him to pay for both of our shops. Whilst the assistant scanned our food, we entertained small talk with him. He didn't seem to care much about our questions. He didn't tell us where he was from when I asked, but asked us a tone of questioned and joked around. He then proceeds to pay for the total shop, approximately £30, and of the £20 change returned to him, he gives £5 to the assistant and tells us to keep the change, probably feeling bad because we're poor students. The strange thing about that encounter that has stayed with me is, he probably will have no recollection of what happened in a couple of months. It'll be something he's completely forgotten about. He genuinely did that out of the good in his heart. There was nothing to gain for him, but the memory stays with me, and although he's most likely forgotten, it's something I'll never forget. Story 41. There's a thing in Stockholm's rich kid district called Vaska. Basically, you order an expensive bottle of champagne, pay for it, and watch how the waiter wastes all of it by pouring it down the drain. Some places let you do it yourself. Sadly, it's an established thing in these kind of circles, like it's on the menu cards and all that. Honestly, the dumbest way of flexing I've ever witnessed. Story 42. I worked at a luxury vacation rental property in a small, affluent mountain town. You can probably narrow it down to a couple places already. Being a vacation rental meant we provided hotel-like services to guests on behalf of the owners. These were full ownership condos, not timeshare. One person owned it, in some cases owned several, with an average value of about $2 million for a one-bedroom unit. I only say this to beat down stereotypes and make a point. Wait for it, though, there's a story coming. As most of our owners were actually relatively down-to-earth and kind people who made their money through a lot of hard work. I got to know some of them. Yes, a few were heiresses, but many more were self-made business people or executives in major corporations. I worked in the film industry previously, and one of the same rules apply there. The craptiest people are the ones who have ego issues. The ones who want to be hot crap, but know they aren't, but are rubbing elbows with those are truly successful. On to the story, there was a tradition at our property that we put out warm cookies near the time the lifts close. We only made a certain number each day. Those that waited around or made it a point to get them always got one. And often we'd make another batch if enough demand was there, though some days we'd just give them away to neighboring businesses' staff because so many would be left. You never really knew, but did your best. Well, one day, a lady and her daughter come looking for the cookies an hour after they were put out. They had been gone about 50 minutes now. She asked about the cookies, and I explained those are put out at a certain time, and was literally opening my mouth to offer to make one specially for her daughter. But before I could exhale a word, she launched into a tirade. "So my daughter doesn't get one? Are you for real? You're a joke. You're worthless. Your job is worthless, and you shouldn't be working here. You are a damn piece of crap." All this in front of her young daughter, no less. In spite of this, I smiled and offered to make one for her daughter, as I had originally intended to offer. She repeated how worthless I was and how I should never bother showing up to work again and stormed off. I didn't say a word to her the rest of her stay. Story 43. I don't work in high-end restaurants or hotels. I do, however, work in the aerotech industry, specifically private jets. I used to be very customer-facing and would see all sorts of people, mostly pilots and the occasional company representative. Most were nice, and some of the representatives felt like they deserved special treatment just because their company decided they should fly in on the plane to watch the maintenance. They were never super demanding, but kind of offhandedly snobbish. "Oh, I bet you get paid well working here. I mean, I'm taking home $450K this year. What about you?" Etc. Keep in mind, this is almost exclusively Learjet and Challenger customers, planes that cost from 15 to 30 million. Then there were the big boys with global $100 million planes. Almost all of them, with exception to some, were privately owned by people who knew they had money. They didn't have to act like they had money. The way they walked, talked, acted, they lived and breathed $100 bills. A customer once dropped in the day before Thanksgiving. We found out because his Tesla had arrived and was waiting for him. Yeah, this dude shipped in his own Tesla rather than rent a car. He arrived. We parked his plane and his stewardess. Every single global had a stewardess. I think it might be a size thing. Either way, they were always good. And him come out. He asks if his Tesla is here. We tell him yes. He hands me $500 and says, "Make sure it gets into a hangar tonight. Split this with your buddy over there." I say, "Yes, sir." And he takes his Tesla and drives off. Me and my buddy made absolute sure that his Global was in the driest hangar on the ramp, and it had 10-foot clearance from all other aircraft. Almost all Global were like that. Not specifically, but having specific things ready, having things done that went above the GM's head, like having his car shipped in, a limo waiting, a police escort, etc. And they just expected those things. They knew they would get it. They had the money to pay anyone to just take care of it for them. They didn't hold it over people's heads. They were never snobbish. They were nice and would always ask you about what you were doing, seem genuinely interested, and then give advice on what they seemingly had experience in. But they knew if their car didn't arrive, if they didn't get an escort, they had the money, the connections, and the power to just make a phone call. And people would be there just to make sure they weren't inconvenienced that way. I love the really rich customers. I actually moved to where I am now, thanks to the advice one gave me, and I am in fact making lots more money than I was when I was very customer-facing. Story 44. Not a high-class restaurant or hotel, just a nice little shop selling fresh house-made pasta and sauces to take home and boil. Heat up yourself. We got the stereotypical rich people due to the location smack in the middle of Marine County, Qatar. This was in the late 80s and food trends were plentiful and rapidly evolving. Many people were very interested in being on the cutting edge of the latest trend, be it the latest hot restaurant or that month's fabulous must-have menu item. Not that they were actually into food, but just to be in the know and brag about how you simply must try the most fabulous tiramisu at latest hot restaurant. We actual restaurant folk would stoically refrain from rolling our eyes in their presence and carry on. So at the pasta shop one evening, a typical Marian matron arrived in her jeweled slippers, clattery jewelry, and a cloud of perfume. She pushed past the other patrons in front of her and said she needed some squid ink pasta. "I'm sorry," I replied. "We don't actually make a squid ink pasta, but you may be able to find it at fancy grocery store in the same plaza. They carry several very good imported items." She gaped at me and started moaning, "Oh, no, no." Of course, now everyone in the place was staring at her. She then told me that she had to have squid ink pasta because she had her gourmet friends coming for dinner, and they had to have squid ink pasta. I apologized again, explaining that we didn't make squid ink pasta and again suggested the fancy grocery store, only to be cut off by her loud wailing, "Oh, no, no, no," again. I just stood and watched along with everyone else in the place as she paced up and down before the display case, clutching her head and repeating, "Squid ink pasta, gourmet friends, squid ink pasta, gourmet friends," over and over at the top of her lungs, as if this incantation would magically call forth a hidden cache of squid ink pasta. Needless to say, we could not provide said squid ink pasta. So I don't know what she served to her gourmet friends that fateful evening. The whole thing was just so bizarre and over the top. Anytime we encountered some delusional entitled weirdo, we'd mutter squid ink pasta and cackle to each other. Story 45. Worked at a private villa in Bali. One guest stood out. She only drinks and bathes in Evian. So one day I spent almost an hour filling a large tub from tons of Evian bottles. The same young woman complained that the path from her villa gate to her room wasn't well lit. She wore sunglasses at night. Story 46. I worked at a swanky Starbucks with a drive-thru, and 2 women still haunt my dreams. Ms. Linda. Ms. Linda came by in her old-school Mercedes around 4:45 a.m. We opened at 4:30 a.m., accompanied by her dog. She would insist we brew a new batch of coffee when she ordered it, or else it wouldn't be fresh. Given her consistency, we eventually just started waiting until 4:45 a.m. to brew our first batch. 5 times she would take a sip and ask us to brew a new batch, all while sitting at the drive-thru window. Granted, there was almost never anyone behind her, but it meant she could watch me grind new beans and wait the full 5 minutes for it to brew. She wouldn't accept a pour over cup, nor could we take coffee from the urn before the full batch finished brewing. Ms. Trish. Ms. Trish would come by around 7:30 on her way to dropping off her son at elementary school. This is a pretty busy Starbucks, and our window time needed to be 30-second, ideally less than 20-second during peak hours. She orders an Americano with steamed half and half. However, she wants you to wait until she is at the window to pull the shots so they are super fresh. I would then hand her the shots, a cup of hot water, and a cup of steamed half and half so she could mix it herself. And if she thought the espresso was too bitter, she would ask us to redo it. Properly pulled shots take 18 seconds, so her order alone would put us in the red for our window time, assuming it was fine the first time. Ms. Linda paid using exact change, no tip. Ms. Trish would at least give us the 12-cent change from her $5 bill. So glad I left that horrid company. Story 47. I didn't work in a high-class restaurant, I delivered for Jimmy John's. However, my delivery radius included a very wealthy area. Most of the stories here are about rich people being excessive with money. However, my experience has been that the rich are often incredibly stingy and holes, and the worst tippers. A man called in an order at 9:57 p.m. when our store closed at 10. I knew that delivery was going to keep me in the store an extra half hour to 45 minutes than usual time, which I would not be paid for. Which is a different story, and yes, I realize this is illegal, but it was my first job and it was being done behind my back. This story happened right after I found out, but before I had the balls to talk to my manager about it. So I deliver his sandwich, and apparently when I delivered, I wasn't as friendly as he thought I should have been. I said Jimmy John's delivery instead of my usual, "Hi there, I've got a Jimmy John's delivery for you." He had paid via credit card using the app, so his tip was already included in the bill. He was so incensed at awful and rude behavior that he called the store, making me stand there and wait while he did it, and demanded that my manager refund the payment, saying that he would pay in cash instead. My manager was generally pretty laid back, so he just went along with it despite it being an unorthodox request. The man then paid me in cash with exact change, thereby denying me my tip, all because I wasn't as friendly as I should have been. I won't name him, but he's a well-known billionaire in my hometown. The tip, of course, was 47 cents, enough to bring his bill to an even dollar amount. He later left not one but two one-star reviews of my store using two false accounts. They were both left the day after the delivery and referenced my manager, my name, and me as the delivery boy. At least I'm assuming it was him, since neither I nor my manager had had any other angry customers recently. Story 48. This was not stereotypical but ridiculous. It was. I had a customer come in the most basic, cheap clothes, pull out a bundle of $2,000 in cash, buy a glass of our most expensive wine, sit by himself for about an hour not doing anything, then leaving having taken only one or two sips. Story 49. I once stayed in a hotel an NFL team had rented for an away game. It was a really nice hotel, and the only reason I was there was for a family member's wedding, and I was sleeping on a couch in a room. The whole place was filled with very wealthy people, and to separate them from the other guests, they rented the 3 top floors and had security to stop anyone from getting to the floors. Best part about the trip was seeing a guy valet park a rented muscle car by just stepping out and handing the keys to the nearest person. Story 50. A young man I'll call business douche tried to send back 2 bottles of Penfolds Grange not because of the taste, but because he was trying to impress older potential clients with his stunning wine knowledge. Yeah, right. The potential clients were so grossed out by the display that they paid for the meal and insisted on paying for both bottles and drinking them. Business douche tried to reach for a bottle to pour himself a glass, and the client told him that since it wasn't up to his standards, he couldn't possibly let him have any. Effective business shaming 101. It was like watching Jack Donaghy at work. Story 51. I used to work in a luxury hotel. A colleague of mine got a call from an in-house guest, asking for a car to take him somewhere. Naturally, he offered him what options we had, and the guest got annoyed and closed the line. A few minutes later, the guest came down to the front desk and asked for my colleague. He then proceeded to show him a cardboard bag literally overflowing with cash, and started saying, "You dare ask me which car just because of different prices? Can't you see how much money I have? Why do I care? Just get me a damn car ready." People. Story 52. Worked at a sushi restaurant in the mid-00s, where we had a half-off night. It was constantly packed. Even if you had reservations, we'd typically get 20 or so minutes behind. Walk-ins? Forget it. 3-hour wait. So this guy comes in and wants a table for one. It's like 6 p.m. on half-off night. I take his name and let him know that the wait is already around 2 hours, but that we have first come seating available at the lounge bar and the sushi bar that he is welcome to. 30-minute comes and goes. The restaurant is chaotic, but people are getting seated. This man comes up and asks for an update on his table. I tell him we are moving along, but it will still be around 1 hour, and remind him of the open seating at the 2 bars, with full menu. Cue the next half hour, the man comes back this time with attitude. Again, I remind him of the original wait time quote and let him know I should be able to seat him within the next half hour. He storms away and comes back not even 5 minutes later. He's going off about how I'm incompetent, and they should really hire someone with half a brain. How can a restaurant function with an idiot at the door? Well, at this point, I'm about a week away from leaving for college. Have been dealing with around 400 guests every Thursday for years, and have had it. I tell the man to go duck himself and that we won't be serving him tonight. Reasonably. Pissed off, he asked to speak with my manager. I tell him there's no way my manager will be nicer to him than I have and direct him to the bar. Guy goes up the bar, hand festers are flying, and then he storms out of the restaurant. Turns out, the guy told my manager I had said to go duck himself, and my manager looked straight at him and asked, "Well, have you yet?" It was glorious. We both got fired. Guy ended up being a restaurant critic for the City magazine. Story 53. Used to be a bartender. Had 4 guys walk up to the bar and order 4 shots of Remy Martin Louis Vetter. which was $435 a 1.5 ounces pour. It's normally poured into a snifter, and a discerning drinker will usually dilute it down slightly because it's between 40 to 100 years aged and is like 55% alcohol by volume. These four rich S didn't know any of that and wanted it in shot glasses, and they proceeded to throw back $1,700 worth of the finest cognac you'll ever taste. They tipped me $300, so I forgave them quickly, but that was such a rich person thing to do. Story 54? I've met two celebrities through my various work experiences. Tim Allen requested that we close the small bakery that I worked at for him while he is dining there. We did. He didn't leave a tip. Later in my career, I met Mario Batali, famous Food Network chef, and he was the most normal person ever. He took a class with us and then proceeded to pay for everyone else's class that was in his group and bought lunch for the staff as well. I guess both are stereotypical rich person things, for vastly different reasons. Story 55? One of my favorite situations was when my wife and I were staying on the Big Island in Hawaii. There was an expensive, all-inclusive resort. We could only afford the bed and breakfast variant, even splurging for our honeymoon. A large family showed up after a few days, and the one father was obnoxiously loud at the communal breakfast. They were kind of bragging about their wealth and making it clear that they thought they were a big deal bringing a large family to an extremely expensive resort. It was obnoxious as everyone there was probably very wealthy, but also it was ruining the quiet outside breakfast next to the Hawaiian beach. There was a happy ending, though, as there was one guest who sat with his family quietly, but had a very specific eating regimen and was high profile enough that the head chef came out to make sure that he was taken care of. Steve Jobs. So while the obnoxious jackass was being loud and everything, Steve Jobs and the chef walk by, and I watch as the loud guy slowly realizes that even with his millions or tens of millions, he's not Steve Jobs. Story 56. I'm 3 years into sous chef at a private resort in upstate New York. Most of our guests are returning from generations before them. Wealthy, very wealthy. We get some congressmen, actors getting away from the daily crap, but mostly families that are crazy rich and 4 generations deep into annual visits. Insane the amount of requests, but one that stands out as a what in the duck? 60-something-year-old woman crying as loud as she can because we didn't have the cookies she wanted. Guys, you would have thought she was just told someone pass. Made a huge scene in the dining room. Her husband has the backbone of a jellyfish and just sat there trying to console her. It's okay, honey. I'll get you cookies. Don't cry. The owner went out and bought store-bought cookies because we do not have time for that crap. We did not tell her they were store-bought. She was happy by the end of the night. Yay? Fast forward to dinner the next night. Same crap. Where's my cookies? We gave her the same store-bought cookies. Same package. These aren't the same. The baker used too much butter this time. Next night? Oh, these are much better. Idiot, it's the same package. She comes every year. We all know ahead what week the cookie lady is going to be staying with us, so we can get her crafty grocery store cookies. Story 57. My mom used to work in a snazzy hotel in Dublin. Mel Gibson stayed while filming Braveheart. He insisted that under no circumstances was anyone to ask for his autograph, and everyone was informed, except one girl who on the Monday came in from sick leave. As soon as she saw the star, she said, "Hello, Mr. Gibson, may I have your autograph?" Well, he went into orbit, demanding that she be fired, not reprimanded, fired. He was a real banana. I hope he's changed. Story 58. Oh, man. This 4-top came into the restaurant I worked at. No, one in the state, consistently. Spent a ton of money, tipped 50% on the bill, and then the guy who signed the check proceeded to leave a $300 Cartier pen in the book. I ran out to the valet stand to return it, and he laughed and said, "Keep it." I was also given a bag of about $500 in just flown-in Bolivian substances, purest I'd ever do, as part of a tip, after I cut up straws for a table to snort with. They were doing substances right in front of the entrance to the server station, where all the staff and most of the guests could see them. Last favorite was a time when a 4-top ordered a last course sushi restaurant of $400 in live uni, urchin, ate one piece of each and then said they were full and left the rest. One of the few times I've seen waitstaff unapologetically smash on someone's leftovers. Story 59. Not a specific event, but we constantly had people stay who would make a big mess and then happily say, "Just charge it to my card," when they booked out. Didn't matter what it was, food or drink, blood, vomit, trash, burn marks. They didn't care how inconvenient or gross it was. They could pay their way out without guilt. The worst one was a busload of Asian business people, a fairly common type of customer at the villas I cleaned, who left the place trashed and full of empty alcohol bottles, broken wine glasses, cigar smoke. We had to shut the main building they used down for days after the left, and again, just charge it to the card. Story 60. 5-star, 5-diamond hotel worker here. A guest was sitting by himself in the lounge sipping a $39 glass of sparkling rose. The table next to him was 6 Italians, 3 couples. The men were drinking beer and whiskey while the women enjoyed a bottle of 2007 Crystal, $800. The ladies were admiring the view by the solo gentleman's table, so he complimented their choice in champagne. "You don't speak to man-wife," exclaimed one of the husbands. "I can talk to whoever I'd like," the man replied. "You don't even look at wife," the husband hollered, followed by shouts in Italian at the women to come back to the table. "You don't speak to me that way. Do you know I am? You're nobody. I halve a billions and you're nothing. Sir, I'm a billionaire. You have no idea who you're talking to or what you're talking about." Now at this point, the hotel security shows up. They awkwardly intervene, which turns the billionaire's wrath on them, leading to grown men screaming at other grown men about their paychecks and penis size. Finally, the solo guest agrees to leave not because he was asked to, but because he decided to the two men go to shake hands at the urging of the wives. As they come out of the handshake, the solo guest finishes, "I own the hotel. If I ever see you in there, I will personally throw you on the street." The only thing missing from this billionaire fight was them throwing wads of cash at each other. Money is weird. Story 61. Positive stereotype incoming. I worked at a nice steakhouse in Houston. Once a year, one of the biggest telenovela stars from Mexico would come into town to shop at the Galleria, and she always ate at our restaurant. After dinner, she would walk through the kitchen, spending about a half hour laughing, taking pictures, and talking with the kitchen staff. In Houston, about 90% of BOH are Hispanic. She was very aware of her status, very well-dressed, and very kind to the hardest-working and worst-paid staff at that restaurant. Maybe doesn't fit here, IDK, but it was cool to see year after year. Story 62. My roommate in college worked at a private resort club as a waitress back in her hometown. She would tell me all sorts of stories about how snobby most of her clients were. My favorite story was when a woman asked for a cheeseburger with no cheese with lettuce, tomato, and mayonnaise. My roommate took the order and moved on to the next person at the ladies' table. After she was done taking orders, she reread everyone's request back to them to make sure they were correct. When she got to the ladies' order, my roommate made the mistake of saying, "And ma'am, you wanted a hamburger with lettuce, tomatoes, and mayonnaise." The woman was livid and said, "No, I want a cheeseburger with no cheese with lettuce, tomatoes, and mayonnaise." She called my roommate all sorts of terrible names and told her how stupid she was for not knowing the difference between a cheeseburger and a hamburger. Then she mentioned how she hated being served by lower-class servers, as they didn't know how to properly take orders. Ironic thing. My roommate's dad worked for the heads of the US, as in, he occasionally would be in the same room as the president. Needless to say, he made a very large income, which was why she was able to go to our private college, lived in one of the richest cities in the nation, and had gone to all of the best schools. She only worked because she enjoyed making her own money and her parents had instilled in her good work ethics. She was a really cool roommate, very down-to-earth and sweet. Story 63. In college, I dated a college student who was the daughter of the Sony America division president. We were at some fancy restaurant in Boston. This was 20 years ago, so I don't remember the name of it. We are eating our dinner next to us, just when a dude seated next to us gets on his hands and knees and proposes to his girlfriend. Girl said yes. My girlfriend congratulates them, and as an engagement gift, writes them a check for $10,000. A couple weeks later, I ask her if that check was ever cashed. She literally forgot about it. A quick phone call to her financial manager, yes, she had one of those, confirmed it was indeed cashed. She shrugged it off like it was no big deal and proceeded along like nothing happened. Story 64. Ridiculous demands. I used to work as a gardener at a few major five-star hotels in London that has had its fair share of A-list celebrities over the years. Some are great, but others have a questionable level of sanity. Some stories, though. A very famous older actress, singer who once played a witch, stayed in one of these hotels for a week or two with her pet dog. She demanded that a mini set of stairs had to be built so her dog could get up and down the bed. She also demanded that her balcony had fresh rolls of turf fitted every day so her dog could piss and crap on it. It also had to be fitted when she wasn't there. So sometimes I had to sit around for hours waiting to install the rolls. The balcony was just some decking. There wasn't supposed to be turf there. The same hotel also had a black book of high-class prostitutes too, and they would often fly in said escort from all over the world to please their rich guests. One rich Arab had 2 a night. He also lived at the hotel, $20,000 a night, for over 2 years. Story 65. A couple who didn't understand why wine was sent back ordered a $700 bottle of wine and said they didn't like it. I told them unless it wasn't corked, correct, simply not enjoying the taste wasn't how it all went down. He laughed and realized he'd been an idiot and was one of our best tippers. In Australia, it's not required to tip, ever. He ended up tipping our table $250 and we shared it amongst the staff. Nice to know that even the rich feel embarrassed for their entitlement sometimes. Story 66. I'm living in a high-end apartment building. I've got 2 garage spots and no car, so I rent them. One spot I've rented to an old man that always pays correctly. He's a prominent lawyer. The other is rented by a rich git who never pays on the correct date. Every month, I sent a message to remind her until she snapped at me saying that it was an absurd that I charged her every damn month. I answered that I wasn't charging, just reminding, but if it bothered her, I wouldn't remind her again. But the next month, I would start collecting a fine for late payment. Now she pays on date, but late at night, just because she is an ass. The spot is for her son's car, who is a young former soccer player. Very healthy and strong legs, can walk a longer distance to his elevator. Now I need one spot for 4th days. Of course I asked for hers. And of course she lost her mind and said I should ask for the other one. Come on, the old man is pretty old and pays on time. But the entitled lady doesn't understand why anybody else in the world would have preference over her. I hate her. When the 4th days are over and the spot is free again, I'll rent for someone else. Story 67. I was a cook in the Hash, one restaurant in Vancouver, WA. Around 2003 and 2009, a grandson of a huge hotel chain rolls up in his Lambo. He always ordered about $10 of food and tipped $100. He sat at the cook's counter, and me being a line cook, we hit it off for our love for college football. One day, he asked if I would come over to his house for a huge boxing match, Mayweather versus De La Hoya, and cook for him and his family. I get there, and he has several Lambos, a huge house on the river, and lets me do whatever I want in the kitchen. I cook the meal for 4 people, and he gives me half of his filet mignon and tells me to join them for the fight. I watched the fight and then cleaned and packed up and charged him $300 for the cost. I get in my boss's car. Mine was broken down, and I rode my bike everywhere. I look at the check I got, and it said $1,700. The cost to fix my car was $1,400, so this covered it completely. I drove home with tears in my eyes. I cried myself to sleep that night. Making a cook's wages is crippling. Fast forward to today, I no longer work in the service industry, and this guy just opened a homeless women's shelter a few months ago. I wish more people who came into money had heart of this guy. Story 68. I used to work as a chef at a restaurant in this massive 5-star resort. Our restaurant is usually quiet during lunchtime, as it is more of a fine dining restaurant and people would go to the less fancy ones for lunch. There were 6 a la carte and 4 all-inclusive restaurants. This guy comes in, casually dressed, shorts and t-shirt, and orders a salad and the 5 most expensive main courses on the menu. 2 other colleagues and I are on shift, so we prepare everything and send it out. 20 minutes later, the waitress serving the guy says he requested 5 clean knives. The guy had tried a bit of everything, then proceeded to cut a layer off the part where he'd eaten with a clean knife, hence the 5 knives. So the rest is not contaminated by him trying it. He said he was full and insisted the food is not wasted and given to the staff on shift, so they can also taste the great food they make. When leaving, he came to the kitchen and thanked. Shook everyone's hand. We later found out the guy owned over half the resort. Apparently, there was no single owner, but he was the biggest investor. Story 69. I work in a 5-star hotel in Germany. We had guests that checked in and were given an upgraded suite for New Year's Eve in a special section of the hotel. They complained when they realized they would have to walk 2 minutes to the New Year's Eve party. Then they complained that the suite wasn't good enough to be a suite and insisted they be placed in a deluxe suite closer to the party. We had literally no rooms available. They were extremely rude and pompous to every employee. It was a nightmare for management. They spent 30 minutes arguing before finally saying, "Fine," and keeping their rooms. Story 70. I worked as a busboy at a restaurant that was part of a hotel that was at the end of its life. The owner, a reputed mob boss, and his eccentric wife, lived in a top-floor suite that was 2 stories tall and lined with white marble, Italian statues, red carpet, etc. The wife would do her grocery shopping from the restaurant's kitchen, and it would be us busboys who took it up. However, she made very specific demands on how the food should be prepared. Once, she asked for 7 pieces of American cheese, and it needed to be on a plate in a star pattern. Another time, she wanted 5 raw eggs, each wrapped in a napkin and then wrapped in plastic, placed inside a large styrofoam cup. Failure to prepare the food to her exact specifications meant being fired. On top of all that, she never once met us when we brought the food. She would buzz us in and instruct us to put the tray in their private elevator and send it up to her. I was once berated because I put a plate of bread on the left wide of a tray instead of the right. After the husband passed, they closed the hotel. For a couple years after, she lived in that penthouse alone, and it was creepy to drive past at nights and see this 14-story hotel completely dark except for her couple lights on the top floor. Story 71. I used to work as a waiter in this nice little Vietnamese restaurant, bistro kind of place. The male boss was, I suspect, damn you rich, and he bought the place for his wife to run just for her to have fun and kill time. She would basically come into the shop with designer handbags and dresses, change in the back, then do 8-hour shifts in the kitchen of almost non-stop cooking. The male boss likes to hang out in the restaurant after work. He's usually in at 7, orders some food, and reads a newspaper or does some work on his laptop until closing. He's a t-shirt and jeans kind of guy. He drives a Lamborghini, which he parks nearby. This is in Singapore, where car prices are insane. A Prius costs easily $100,000. If it was a busy day, when we're closing up, he'd get up and start sweeping and cleaning the restaurant. Sometimes, when we were really swamped, he'd go into the back and start doing dishes. As we didn't have a guy who washes the dishes, the waitstaff would just take turns. Insanely cool guy. Story 72. My brother was an apprentice cook in one of the most prestigious hotels on the French Riviera. That week, he was assigned to prepare the free tapas, amuse-bouche they were giving at the hotel bar for customers. This super famous French actor comes in. He played a lot of comic roles, so there's this good aura attached to him. Long he requests to have more of the free appetizers. Was getting mad at my brother when he didn't prepare them fast enough because he was hungry. Totally changed our view of the guy in his movies. Story 73. We were actually the customers in this situation. Before our honeymoon, we had saved up for a long time so we could stay at a really nice hotel. So we get there to check in, and the lady at the reception just looked at us like we had walked into the wrong hotel. But she gets us the keys for our room, and we ask her when breakfast starts. She gives us the time and then says, "But it's much cheaper to eat breakfast at local restaurants and coffee shops." We had already prepaid to have breakfast included. It sounded a bit weird, but we just shrugged it off and went to our room. Later that day, we're on our way out and stop by the reception, and my husband asks the same receptionist where the hotel bar is and if it's open. She doesn't even answer the question, but says, "Our bar is very expensive. You'll have a much better time finding cheaper drinks at our local pubs." We just look at each other, and my husband now has this look of, "Listen here, you little crap." The hotel bar was a bit over our price range, but at that point we were pissed. So we spent more money than we should have just to show the receptionist that we could. But we're not going back to that hotel again, ever. Story 74. In Norway and Sweden, rich kids do this thing called washing champagne. They order 2 or more bottles of expensive champagne, and then ask the waiter to pour one of them in the sink, just to flex. They literally only want to show they can afford this. Luckily, after a few years of this becoming popular, several restaurants have forbidden this bullcrap activity. Story 75. Was at a nice hotel in Berlin, eating breakfast, and there was a couple next to us. Man behind his newspaper, woman reading her iPad. Man did not look up from his paper, but actually reached his hand way above his head and snapped to summon the waiter. And when the waiter didn't appear within a nanosecond, he lifted his hand higher and double snapped. Then didn't even look at the waiter when he arrived, just ordered him around from behind his paper. Honestly, who actually snaps to get service? I thought only ultra antagonists from movies, but apparently they're real. Story 76. Barely eat any of the food they spent a lot of money on. I ate so much excellent tenderloin off the plates coming in to be washed as a prep chef, guy who chops up all the stuff so the real chef can cook it, when I was a teen. Story 77. I worked in a hotel in Edinburgh, and we had Snoop Dogg come to stay. He prepaid the smoking fine, which came as no surprise. After he left the room, service team found a large amount of substances and hundreds of pounds worth of food and drink which hadn't been touched. Safe to say we had a wee party after our shift. He also only wears a pair of socks once, so there were plenty of those lying around too. Another time, someone did a crap in the corridor. This happens fairly regularly as some guests feel that because they are paying 300 pounds a night, they get to do whatever they like. Story 78. As a valet, probably tossing us the keys to the car, expecting us to know who they were. It was quite the experience to try to write a ticket out for them. They took offense to it. Story 79. I worked at a high-end establishment where all the waitstaff and bussers were traditionally male and we wore tuxedos. One time, a group of Secret Service-looking fellas came in and talked with the owner. The next few days, a ton of these guys were in and out at all times, even before we were open just checking the place out. Because lo and behold, the queen of daytime talk shows, Oprah Winfrey herself, came in to dine with us. She had a ridiculously large head, was awesome, bought every table in the place a decent-ass bottle of wine, like this place was not cheap at all, and pics and autographs with anyone who came up. She had a monumental security service, dudes stationed at the front door. Throughout the room she was dining in and standing in front of her table. It was badass, and she tipped a crap load. Stellar experience. Story 80. My father traveled for business a lot. He's in his 70s now, so near retirement. Doesn't travel much now. I remember going to all sorts of interesting places with him while he was on business as a child. He is a trivia fiend, like a straight-up addict for factoids and knowledge. He'd go to bars, restaurants, and the hotels and watch Jeopardy with the barmen and waitstaff. He'd keep mental tally of how many correct answers they'd give. And when the program was over, tip a $20 per correct answer. This was in the 1980s. I assume the tips were on par with or greater than their weekly salaries. He still does this occasionally, go to a random bar, restaurant near where he lives around 7 p.m. and request Jeopardy be put on the television. What's the weirdest thing you've witnessed in the home of a rich person? Story 1. I was at John Waters' house for his birthday, and he has a room set up as a lifelike recreation of a Met lab. It wasn't a real Met lab, it's an art piece. He told me that when Bill Clinton visited him, the Secret Service agents were extremely concerned about the room. Story 2. One client had a whole separate house on their property just for their dogs. They'd referred to a dog house, and I was expecting like maybe a little building in the yard where they kept their toys or something. But this was a full furnished home with king-sized beds and a huge playroom on the main floor. They had a full training and feeding staff to care for the dogs and everything. They lived in their own house and would come over to visit. Seemed like a weird dynamic to have with your pet. One client didn't have a litter box for the cats. Their cats, I guess, didn't like using the boxes in the basement, and they didn't want to put boxes upstairs, so they put down pond liner and kitty litter across an entire room in the basement and had their housekeeper run a rake through it daily. Story 3. As a kid back in the Mesozoic era, my best friend and I used to play in a converted racquetball court and lounge under the old West Coast mansion her family had lived in since its construction. The stairs to it were hidden behind a closet off of the abandoned servants' quarters. Halfway down the stairs was a wine cellar. A decoy, as the actual wine cellar for the home was under the kitchen. Another staircase behind a rack of dusty bottles led 2 stories down to our giant play area beneath this. At the beginning of WU, before Pearl Harbor, my friend's paranoid WWI vet grandfather had dug out the space over fear of Japanese, or German, invasion. Her dad made the giant room regulation designed for racquetball years later. Maybe originally squash. Not sure, but the lounge area was also glassed off above it, so one could look down into the court like a gallery. It was really neat. Also, upstairs in the living room was a wall, straight out of an old mystery novel. If you pushed a spot just right, the wall opened to a hidden room. Super tiny, had a button to ring certain other rooms in the house, as the home had these all ready to call for staff. My friend's mom said it was so if someone quickly had to hide, they could alert the household of danger. We used to pretend to be on Nancy Drew cases all the time. So fun. The family was wealthy, but despite the amazing home, they lived a completely pretentious free life. Normal cars, camping vacations, frugal living as sport. But they were philanthropists, too, especially supporting organizations like the Humane Society. One thing about this family's home was all the cats. I loved kitties, but had a mother who preferred her animals well-seasoned. The family had the space, so they always had, and were looking to adopt out but often didn't. At least 20 rescue cats, many with special needs. Ha ha ha, I'm old. I didn't know how to write that. Special needs kitty mystery mansion really is actually an appropriate description. Story 4. Buddy of mine has a car elevator. Instead of just building a bigger garage, he stores his cars stacked onto each other like some kind of Hot Wheels accessory. It's very surreal. Story 5. I knew someone who didn't like to do laundry, so she just bought new clothes for each of her 4 kids every week. They were always high-quality or designer clothes. At the time, all her kids were 16 years old. What would happen if they liked an item a lot and couldn't find it again? Why not just teach the kids to do their own laundry? Why not hire a housekeeper who can do it? There are so many options, other than spending thousands every month just to avoid laundry. Plus, they rarely donated it, just bagged it up and threw it out. I never could wrap my head around it. Story 6. In Naples, FL, I was at a house with a sensory deprivation room. Flat black walls with accosting dampening baffles. In the middle was a coffin-like bathtub. It had speakers and a flat screen display in the lid. I heard that the room cost over $100,000 to build. Story 7. This is a copy-paste of a comment I made on a similar question a while ago. I've worked for some of the richest people in Maryland, and the one thing that stands out more than others is this doctor I worked for in Montgomery County. It's one of the most affluent zip codes in America. Anyway, this guy owned a crapload of offices around the DC area. Tons of employees and associate doctors, etc. Guy was seriously loaded. Huge garage full of super expensive cars like multiple Ferraris, art collection, wine cellar, the works. I used to do at work for his medical practice and manage all the servers and stuff, and occasionally went to their house because I was the lead admin. I once was working in his house and was walking around upstairs where the bedrooms were. Crap. This guy was laying in bed being fed by an assistant. Like he was literally laying in bed while someone hand-fed him. And not like geez, but a regular meal. It was damn weird as crap. Imagine someone feeding you a full meal like a steak and spoons of soup, salad, etc. And you never used your hands. It was like an adult being fed like a baby. It seemed like Saddam Hussein type crap. I've never seen anything like that before. And that was what popped into my mind. Like a dictator or something who demands to be treated like a literal king. Keep in mind this was a man in his 50s who was in fine physical shape and didn't need a caregiver. It was just pure opulence. Then one time I was working in the kitchen area and his young son, probably late teens, early 20, came walking past me and stunk to high heaven a pot, which I'm totally cool with and we joked about. He went to the kitchen and poured an IPA into a glass and went back to his room. This was at 9 a.m. I thought it was hysterical. He was a cool kid from my interactions with him. Probably just figured my dad is rich as crap, so I don't have to worry about anything. so he was totally laid back. I've got some other strange things, but that is by far the strangest. Story 8. They had part of the house permanently decorated for Christmas, and it included a fully decorated Christmas tree that was suspended upside down from the ceiling, which was actually pretty awesome. Story 9. I was a visiting nurse. I went to both poor people's homes and rich people's and found hoarders in both category. The type of thing where the floor would be covered in products and you'd have to follow a path through it to get to the back of the house. Story 10. I know someone who's worked for a very rich person, probably worth billions. He had more than 100 staff on site, including chefs for the staff, all while divorced and living alone. He had a trivia staff member, someone hired to tell him interesting facts and stories daily. That was his only job. Someone else was hired to maintain his shoes. Polish, shine, the works. If I didn't hear it firsthand, I wouldn't have believed it. Our CEO has a driver that comes in, collects his stuff and laptop, and drives him home. Story 11. Years ago, I interviewed as a nanny at this massive house. From the outside, it just looked gigantic. They seemed normal for rich people, but as they were giving me a tour, I realized they had multiple rooms that were just completely barren. They had a living room, 3 bathrooms, their bedroom, each of the kids' rooms and a playroom, a home office, the kitchen and dining room, and a guest room all nicely decorated and lived in. But there were like 5 other rooms and a couple bathrooms that were completely empty. No furniture, no decor, just plain beige walls and carpet. They had lived there for years and weren't in the process of remodeling or anything. They told me one of the empty rooms would be mine, so that made sense to leave it empty for a live-in nanny. But the rest, they just said, we don't use these. They had also mentioned they weren't having more kids, so it wasn't like it was extra rooms for the future. It just kind of boggled my mind, like they just bought a mansion far bigger than they needed for no reason, other than they could, then didn't even bother doing anything with the extra space. I ended up not taking the job, but a nanny friend of mine did. She said those doors always stayed shut, except when the cleaners came. They spent hours cleaning this giant house, including the pristine empty rooms that never got used, so even more wasted money. Apparently one time, she let the kids build a massive pillow and blanket fort in one of the rooms, and the mom lectured her about letting them play in there, so they weren't even allowed to use the space for anything. Also, since the room was empty, my friend thought when she started that she'd be able to move in her own bed and furniture. Nope, they bought all new stuff for her to use. They had a live-in nanny before, so then we wondered if she's had her own furniture, or if they just bought new furniture every time they got a new nanny. Then at one point while my friend worked there, one of the little girls wanted to change rooms to one of the empty ones. They completely redid the new one with new paint, furniture, and whatever decor she wanted. Everything left over from the new one was hauled away to the dump, even though it was nice kids' furniture that was still in pretty good shape, even the old bedding and everything. And then the now empty room had the pink walls repainted the same sad beige as all the others and the fun carpet replaced. So now I just imagine that over the years, the kids played a weird game of bedroom musical chairs, with rooms getting redecorated and a new one being left sad beige and barren. My friend left after a couple of years working for them, so no idea if they ever did end up using any of those empty rooms. Story 12. A very rich person I know does not eat leftover food. They will cook a feast, and afterwards everything goes straight in the garbage no matter how much is left over. Story 13. I have one. This is crazy. I once worked for a multi-billionaire family who lived in Atherton, CA, Silicon Valley. Atherton has the highest median home prices in the US at $8 million. They lived at the very top of the big hill with sweeping views of the forested coastal range. Stunning. Of course, they had a pool house, etc. They also had a home in Woodside, CA, one on the Strand in Manhattan Beach, CA, and a farm in Oregon, where every week their pilot, using their private jet of course, it would fly up there to pick up fresh veggies, fruits, which they stored in the cold room under the house, kind of near the underground wine cellar. Both spaces were huge. They only ate pheasant on holidays. Larry Ellison was one of their best friends, and at their wedding snuck into the wine cellar, grabbed a $2,000 bottle of wine, and walked around drinking it out of the bottle. They were pissed about that. Crystal champagne was provided for guests. Massive wedding. Read on. It gets crazier. One day while I was at their house, they had blueprints spread out all over the place. I asked if they were remodeling. No, they were building a new house across the street, which seemed odd to me because why give up that view? She said, no, they were going to live in both houses. The new one has a ballroom over 2 stories high with floor-to-ceiling glass, tennis courts, a consecrated chapel, they're Catholic, complete with rows of pews, statuary of saints, and gold leaf everywhere. This house also had an underground garage where they kept a multitude of Ferraris, classic cars, Porsches, a Fisker, and a Koenigsegg. The kids' rooms had their own huge bathrooms with a tub in the bathroom and a TV at the end which slid down, hidden, at the touch of a button. Each room had a 2-way fireplace asterisk that led to a large deck. Each bedroom, all bedding was Charlotte Thomas bespoke, Google them. I've never seen anything like this before, and probably never will again. I might add that the parents were very nice, and those kids, while living in pure luxury, were sweet as can be and not spoiled in the slightest. They were respectful, generous, and kind. Story 14. My friend's dad growing up was one of the top lawyers in our state. Their house was so damn big, I got confused, lost, on all the staircases they had everywhere. They would split in a few places and lead to banisters that had different connections to different parts of the house. They had a room just for dishes. Her mom had a huge room for sewing and another for different crafts. They both had an office, many guest rooms, a small kitchen in one part with a sink and coffee pot and fridge. Their main bathroom for guests had heated floors and rainfall showers and everything. I loved her shower. Her room had a balcony and a table outside. They had a pool and hot tub, horses in a barn, and lots of cute barn cats. I was very poor and had a messed up situation in my childhood. I stayed there a lot, and they would even take me for weeks in the summer because my mother was not there. Really great people. They didn't give handouts or anything. I would literally scoop up horse crap and clean stalls and help with everything for those horses when I stayed. I wanted to help. They had a maid, but we still cleaned up after ourselves. Their kitchen was gigantic, and I always loved the fancy pasta water arm over the stove. I had so much fun cooking with her mom and us having the big dinners, Easter, Thanksgiving, Christmas, with them. They were so magnificent and beyond anything I would have ever experienced without them. I got my first pair of cowboy boots from them for Christmas. Her dad bought me a plane ticket one time out of the blue because I wanted to visit my grandmother. Never forget them. Story 15. I used to work as an exterminator, mostly pest control. This had me walking through houses from the poor to the rich. One day, I pulled up to a 4-story mansion with more rooms than I could count. I spoke with the lady at the door and got started. As I sprayed, I noticed there wasn't much furniture in the house. As I went, I made a game of counting the furniture I could find. Over 50 rooms, and the whole building had 13 pieces of furniture. Pretty odd, but then I went into the very last room, a mudroom, right by the door I came into. I stop as I walk in, completely shocked. A full-size adult pig stretched from one end of the room to the other. I'm talking 6 feet stretched out across the room. Flies buzzed around its head as it stared at me. Suddenly, the lady, who I hadn't seen since she let me in, says, "Oh, don't go in there. She doesn't like men." Then she walked me out, paid me, and went back inside. Story 16. In my early 20s, I dated a girl whose dad was rich. She brought me to Thanksgiving one year at her family's retreat in the mountains. While my GF gave me a tour of the place, she showed me her dad's study, library, which had a trophy case with about 30 trophies. Her dad's name was etched on them, but all of the other details were blacked out, covered up. I was told that under no circumstances was I to ask what the trophies were for because we weren't even allowed in there. Story 17. I worked as a house cleaner in college, and we would service primarily large homes belonging to wealthy folks. There was this one place that gave me the impression the couple was living well beyond their means. Huge house, but almost completely empty. The other girls who had been working there longer told me the couple had been clients for a while, so it wasn't like they were just moving in or anything. Only the master bedroom and this one little den was furnished. The wife was the definition of a trophy wife. Skinny, blonde, lots of plastic surgery, and she was always a real idiot. Would constantly call our boss right after we had finished cleaning to say she found a single hair or a tiny spot on the floor or something dumb like that, just a bored housewife. This one time, she requested that we vacuum under the cushions of the one couch in the house. We go to do that and find a massive treasure trove of black BBW adult film. Just tons of magazines and DVDs. She asked that if we found anything in the couch to leave it on the kitchen island. So we did. We're not sure if she did it intentionally to catch her husband, or if she had no idea it was there and came home to a surprise. We never heard from them again after that. Story 18. Rich grandparents had a brand new house built, had a $100,000 splash pad built for their only grandchild who has never visited them at their new house. Story 19. Ooh, I have two. I was on a sales call for a very extensive property and was met at the front door by the house manager who was going to show me what I needed to see. There was a gigantic pure white rug just inside the main entrance door with some decoration around the side. I was instructed to be sure I didn't set foot on the rug because it was something like $100,000, and nobody was allowed to walk on it. The other was a long-term customer, quite wealthy and had a product. In his little getaway weekend house that required yearly warranty inspections, I was training a new tech on the process, and he had recently had the entire basement used to be storage flood, and I knew he got a payout to fix it. This is also where the inspection area was. He was one of my favorite customers, very kind and soft-spoken, always asking about how the family was doing in his 60 bungalow full of cool African sculpture and art, mechanical engineer for massive architecture projects. He also was well known for throwing all-out group sex on certain weekends. So, show up for the post-flood inspection and he does the usual pleasantries and I head down with the new guy, exterior door entrance. Open the door and there's a dog kennel by the door with a leather collar and a bowl on the top. Me and the tech are like, oh crap, he got a dog. We both love dogs. I flip on the lights and behold a full-on sex toy. I look at new guy and say, I guess no dog, huh? Anyway, do the job without touching anything, although everything was spotless, and head back up to give the paperwork. Guy with a twinkle in his eye asked me what I thought of the renovations from the insurance money. I tell him it looks like the weekends are going to be even better than they used to be. And he has a laugh, says they sure will be, and tell me to make sure I say hi to everyone. New tech was a total deer in headlights. Story 20. I worked for a very self-centered man back in the 90s. He threw an office Christmas party at his house and he loved to give tours. He thought his closet was so impressive. It was wide open with lights on and rope barriers in front of the door. Rope barriers, like a museum. Story 21. I worked as a dog sitter, caregiver in college, and this couple had a Yorkie whose eye had popped out and been surgically put back. It needed antibiotic ointment twice a day, and they couldn't do it. They were trying to apply it with a Q-tip, and I guess that freaked out the dog. Anyways, they stood in awe as I was like, let me, and proceeded to apply the ointment with my finger. They never went out and always wore their PJs. This was long before pandemic. Story 22. I was a guest in the home of an ugly rich guy who founded a company you've heard of. He married a sweet southern girl, who he met while she was stripping, and she served us drinks in her panties while we bowled in their private underground bowling alley. Interesting evening. Story 23. My Bill worked one summer for a roofing company in cottage country in Ontario and installed Margaret Atwood's roof. Her place is covered in portraits of herself, like apparently they're all over the place. Story 24. Visited the home of a wealthy associate of mine, and I found their home very generic. They bought a huge home because they could afford it, but didn't have enough possessions to fill it. So they hired an interior decorator to do every room. Every room looked like the lobby of a nice hotel, attractive and comfortable and completely devoid of any personality. The putting green in the back was, however, a nice touch. Or would have been, except this guy didn't golf. Story 25. I have a cousin who's dating someone who's in a very wealthy circle of people in the mid-southeast. They said they went to a holiday gathering at an acquaintance of someone in the circle, and that those people had real-life dinosaur eggs on display in their home and were excitedly showing them off. Story 26. Music lessons to this dude who lived in a mansion way up in the mountains. When you walked through his front door, the first thing you saw was an enormous, low-resolution photo of his wife in a bikini. The image covered the entire wall below the mezzanine, and it was pasted to the wall like wallpaper so it couldn't be removed. Great guy, but I always thought that it was weird that all their guests, children, family members, etc. were all being greeted by an enormous, low-quality image of his wife's scantily clad body. I always got the sense that she wasn't too happy about it either. Story 27. The part of the house I was in was nearly entirely unfurnished. There was art on the walls, we were there to deliver art, and no furniture. I think I saw a set of bar stools to one side in the living room. The room that the art was going into was furnished. It seemed like an elaborate guest bedroom that had been turned into a home office. There was a built-in bookshelf all along a wall, and big, expensive Lego sets on the tops of the bookshelves. The room was mostly empty, except for a photo shoot area that was set up to have fake clouds on a blue background. The ceiling was covered with thick red curtains. There was a crystal chandelier. The ceiling wasn't that tall. I remember because one of the paintings barely fit, and the chandelier and fabric made it hard to navigate. Wasn't allowed to interact with the owner, and we had a handler assisting us. We were told that under no circumstances were we to let the cat into this room. The cat odor in the mansion was extreme, and I referred to it as Cat Piss Mansion for months. We had a struggle parking our truck, because there were other workers there, doing repairs on the tennis courts. Bonkers people. We also delivered art to their mother's mansion, and she had 4 Andy Warhol-style portraits of herself in her garage. We weren't allowed in the house, but were allowed to carefully set things in the garage. Story 28. Dated a guy who had a large square garage with 4 doors. 4 classic Corvettes pointed north, south, east, and west, so we could just get in and go. No backing up required. Story 29. Absolute squalor. I run on an ambulance in a decently affluent suburb in PA, and I've been in 2 estates where the inside of the homes were bad enough to call social services. Houses where there was 8 figures of artwork on the property, and people were sleeping on mattresses on the floor. It's jarring. Story 30. Not too weird, but I had rich friends growing up, and one had 3 cell phones in elementary school. Another had cheetah print carpet in her bedroom, which I thought was the epitome of rich.